As one story ends, the next begins.
3 words to describe Zlatan, that's kind of difficult.
Flamboyant.
Strong. Determined. Warm.
That he's complex.
Big smile. Winner. Technical.
Proud to be from Malmö.
Self-confident.
Incredible.
Great man.
Weak, strong, brilliant.
Cool.
Malmö, the third largest metropolis in Sweden, vibrant and cosmopolitan, with an economy that's regenerated in recent times. The city stands as a monument to the new Sweden. It's a city notable in football terms for Malmö reaching the European Cup final of 1979. Within Malmö lies Rosengård. This area has a million stories to tell, but one in particular stands out. This is where Sweden's greatest footballer was brought up, where his first steps on a path to greatness were taken. This is the story of Zlatan, of who he is, of what he is, and of where he came from.
Rosengård is one of the underprivileged areas with a lot of different problems. There are high unemployment, there is a big diversity when it comes to nationalities, and many of the people living there are foreign born. So of course it's one of the city districts that you can read about in the media with all the problems. And of course also in that way the story of Ibrahimovic is the contrasting the other media stories around Rosengård.
Rosengård it's one of the poorest areas in Malmö and in Sweden, and it's got a very high level of immigrants living there, and very high rates of unemployment also. So I mean, socially it's one of the hardest or most complicated areas to live in.
There's several different parts of Rosengård. And the part where he came from is not the worst one, by far, but still it's bad enough if you have a low social status and maybe no education. Zlatan himself has not much of an education, so he makes his success through his skills with his feet and his talent for seeing what the game should be like.
Här var jag bor nu just nu, det är hur trevligt som helst. Jag stormtrivs här faktiskt. Alla känner alla här. När man går på gatan kan man bara stanna till vid någon, kvittar hur gammal hon eller han är. Så snackar man med den personen. Till exempel jag kan gå ut på balkongen och kasta ner en 20-lapp till en av småungarna, gå och handla mjölk. Springer de iväg och handlar mjölk och kommer tillbaka. Så det är på många sätt man kan förklara varför man trivs med.
There's, I think in every city there is a environment that is not so good at each other, but there are quite a lot of areas in Rosengård which is really good and really good people and so on. So you shouldn't mark it, I think, as a bad environment.
Maybe Rosengård is not a ghetto, but it's certainly near something like that. And he lived outside Sweden. He lived in the middle of Malmö, but he was 19 years when he first watched Swedish telly for the first time. He didn't know anything about the traditional Swedes. He lived in a very tough neighborhood. You know, later he met guys who said, "Nice to meet you," and things like that. But in the word Zlatan grew up, you have to show, no, look at me, hey, you know, you have to be tough. And that was, I think, his first lesson. To survive, you have to be tough. He lived first with his mother, with his 5 siblings, and his mother was a cleaning lady, and sometimes he hit him with his wooden spoon, and sometimes his mother hit him so hard that this wooden stone broke, and then he had to go buy another one, as it was his fault that he... and then the mother, because of certain circumstances, lost custody over him. He moved to his father.
När kommer mamma, sa du?
Jag vet inte. Det ringt Jennys mobil.
He loved his father, he loves his mother as well, but back in those days his father was sort of traumatized over the Balkan War. He was drinking heavily, and I think he didn't even see Zlatan. He was just sitting there at the telly, seeing the latest news about the war, and were drinking. So Zlatan was out all day, nicking bicycles, and he was a little thief back then.
He is a good bike stealer. He was...
When he was young, he stole some bikers and he makes
With him.
Not that with him.
He used to run good from the cops when he stole bikes, and
He was a very fast guy.
Yes.
Yeah, he must trust in himself, and he learned that from Rosengård, because all the people here in this place trust about themselves, and after that others can do something in the future.
He's very important to us because we look after him. He is a good player.
Maybe we can say a lot of people in Rosengård, there's Alaskan, love Zlatan because he is a special player.
When he was asked about the travel he did from this this problematic Rosengård to buying one of the big villas down by the sea, he was asked what did that travel mean to him. He looked into the camera and he said that Zlatan may leave Rosengård, but Rosengård never leaves Zlatan.
You can see that just the fact that when he came out in the professional world, from Sweden, where he was only known as Zlatan by first name, he changed so he would have Ibrahimovic on his shirt, on his jersey, because he wanted to honor his background. Being from a Muslim background, being from very, very low-key, very low-status background, he really wants to show all the kids at Rosengård and Malmö in general that if I could do it, you can do it.
Football in this city and in many other cities, I mean, the people who makes it the best careers are the people who come from kind of tough backgrounds. They have to fight a lot. And also I think in his case, he got kicked out of his house a lot. And outside his building there was a pitch. And of course he spent most of the time there. So if he was from a safer family where he could stay at home and watch TV, maybe he wouldn't be out of the pitch so much. So I mean, I think that is a really, you've been to Rosengård and you see it's actually there's a lot of spaces for young people, especially if you like to play football.
It was not easy for him, as I understand it. Obviously you should ask him, but as we understand it, he had to fight for himself, and it was not that easy neighborhood to be raised in, and that made him fight, and he used the talent he had, I think, and that's what made him the great star he is.
I'd say that coming from Rosengård, one of the things you really need is street wisdom. Because that is what enables you to be someone there. And if you want to make a social network where you can grow, either if it's sports or it's a business or whatever, you need to have that. And in the tougher parts, you're taught the hard way. And I would say that Zlatan he's no angel, he's no saint. He's probably done quite a few things that most people wouldn't be proud of. But then again, that is part of what made him so tough, that he could go all the way to the top. So the background makes all the difference, I think.
Honestly, I didn't know that it was so hard for him at home, which I have read in the book today, and we never discuss it. But he managed to hide it on the practice in a way. So. I was always open to my players to if they have some problems. I wanted them to come to me and talk about it, but we didn't talk about the problem he had at that time.
Zlatan was honest, fun, creative in his language, and with a lovely smile, so he had everything the camera needed. I mean, he was a great character for a film.
Din egen insats?
Nej, jag spelar okej, men kanske missar för många chanser.
Många sekvenser du lättar och trixar och leker. Händer inte att de blir lite förbannade nästan när du lurar bort dem?
Nej, jag bara skojar lite med dem ibland. Sånt som kom.
Okej, jättebra Zlatan.
That's the personal side, and of course then amazing skills, techniques, and of course that was a great combination for us. The first time I met him, and then I was really nervous, of course, because I really wanted to write this book. And I was nervous meeting Zlatan, but he didn't really see me at all, I thought. He was talking about other things. And then suddenly he asked me the first question, and he said to me, "David, do you believe in God?" You know, I was nervous, what kind of question is that? And I said, maybe this guy is really religious, or he wanted someone to share his beliefs. I don't know what. I don't know, Zlatan. I said, I don't know if I believe in God. And then he looked at me with that Zlatan blade, and he said, then you don't believe in Zlatan either. And I said, yes, I do believe in you, Zlatan. And then he said, no, because God sent me to Rosengård to play football. And I thought, this guy, I mean, he's absolutely crazy. He's a megalomaniac. I mean, he thinks he's God or something. And then he just blinked his eyes, just turned me on. So that was the first meeting with him. His father and mother didn't have any money, you know, he didn't have this nice clothes.
He has been talking and writing a lot about coming to the richer areas because he went to a school where there were rich kids and he couldn't buy the same clothes as them. He didn't have the new shoes.
His colleagues in the Malmö FF, they have this, you know, football shoes that cost 2,000 with kangaroo shin. I mean, he's bought his shoes for 59 crowns, you know, in this food store.
I mean, as a teenager, you want to fit in, and he felt that he didn't, and that I think was quite hard for him.
One day he showed me, I mean, you were out, I said, when you were a kid. So what was it like when you come home in the evening? He said, come, David. And we walked to the fridge and he opened it, and I was, you know, amazed because it was full. The fridge was all these Italian delicatesses all over. And he said, you know, David, it's still like this. If not my fridge looks like that, you know, I get anxiety, I get anger. And then he remembered his childhood when he come home, and in the anger and hunger was beating him in, and he thought the same thing every time, made me something. And then he said to me, some days I was hungry as a wolf, and there were only bears in the fridge. And that, David, is a pain in that I will never forget.
He felt poor and he felt different in a way that can be really hard for a teenager.
In the early childhood, I mean, nobody ever noticed him. I mean, his mother was, you know, occupied with his work, and all his other brothers and sisters, and his father with the war. And if any grown-up saw him, they thought, I mean, what is this guy gonna steal or something? They didn't see him in any positive way. The only place where they sometimes saw him in a positive way was on the football ground. So I think football was the first way for him to be seen in a positive way.
A lot of things that made him great is still there. And of course, part of it is, of course, this kind of the social revenge. I'm going to show them. That's very strong in him. And I think that's very strong in others, like Zidane, or you can talk about other big footballers. They have this kind of social revenge too.
In one way, he's this tough, very secure guy, but deep inside, he's still this insecure kid from the ghetto. So he has this inside, and I think he uses it, this insecurity and this anger that his childhood gave him. You know, this anger, I want to show them. They think that I'm just this little, you know, immigrant kid, but one day I will show them. He uses that anger and that insecurity, which is still inside him.
And it's we and them, you know, and the we are kind of the people below, you know, and you can see now in France, you can see all the rap artists and all the kids from the suburbs, they love Zlatan. And I think that's really interesting because it's exactly the same feeling here in Sweden. Everybody who has an immigrant background, who has to fight a little bit more to get into this society, they love him because he's their hero.
I mean, the middle class, we look down on immigrants, especially people living in this kind of neighborhoods. So even if it's not a Zlatan word, I mean, he felt immediately stigmatized of coming from that background. It's the feeling that you treated him as this little ghetto kid. You know, if you go, I think Zlatan is so nice to be with, but if you pretend to be upper class and, you know, and try to fool him and look down at him, I mean, he remember and he get angry.
Otroligt mjuk och fin kille, va? Hans bakgrund gör ju att han kanske har den här tuffa och kaxiga attityden. Det är en slags mask eller ett försvar för honom mot han kanske ser angrepp både från höger och vänster. Och vi pratar ju mycket med honom och det är en fantastiskt fin kille, va?
Jag känner ibland att jag kan vara lite så kaxig. Men alla har sin kaxighet, men alla har sina gränser. Jag kanske går för långt ibland. Men det är rätt så som folk tror, att jag är så kaxig idiot, jag fattar ingenting. Där jag har mina gränser. Jag kan även vara ödmjuk ibland. Jag väljer oftast vara mest kaxig. För annars kan de trycka ner mig lätt, tycker jag.
When the fathers, he had beat a guy in the club, and the fathers wrote this list that Zlatan Ibrahimovic don't belong in Malmö FF. And I think that's incredibly important for him. You must imagine, he come there to this club with all these middle-class kids, and he didn't have money, he didn't have the right way to talk, and then the fathers wrote a list that he didn't want him in the club. And that was important, of course, and you can deal with this in all kinds of ways. You can just quit. I mean, I don't care about these brats, or you can try to be like them. But he understands that he will fight and show them, and I think that's an important moment in his career.